In this video, we're going to work through a costing exercise where I show you the mathematics of the calculations you need to do, but we do need to start with understanding why we've got to do them. And what I've done to explain that is I've pulled up the support material that you will get in any exercise where you've got to do this, including an exam. So what I want you to notice is the fact that we are given conversions for 250 mils in grams. And the reason is that you are dealing with cups and spoons and measurements that are in milliliters that are normally used for liquids, right? But the way that we buy them is we buy them in grams. So when you buy, for example, 200 grams of baking powder, you buy it in grams, but when you measure it out, you're going to need maybe 5 mils or 1 mil, and that's not the same. But there is a way to do that conversion, and that's one of the things we need to be able to do. So have a look at this document and notice that all the conversions here relate to 250 milliliters or 1 cup, and every conversion tells you how many grams of that particular product you get for every 250 milliliters. A word of warning then about the scale that you're using. You've got a scale that might be able to measure things in milliliters and grams, but the milliliter one only works for liquids. So we've got to understand that for most of these ingredients here, we are dealing with solids. And solids, while they can be measured in milliliters, they're not going to do that correctly on a scale. On a scale, you need to measure grams, and you need to use cups and spoons to measure things in milliliters. I'm going to walk you through a document that I will then fill in for you, but I want you to have a big picture for what we're going to come back to. So the way we're going to do a costing exercise is firstly, using that document, we're going to convert the milliliters into grams because that's how they get sold. Okay, and we'll come back and do an example in a moment. The next thing we've got to do is we've got to realize that even though we've got it in grams, that's not how it is sold. So I might need 12 grams of corn flour, but nothing is going to be sold in measures of 12 grams. What I need to be able to do is figure out what 12 grams cost if I know how much, for example, 500 grams costs, or in the case of cake flour, 2.5 kilograms cost. So we have to do another costing part where we calculate what an individual amount costs, even though we can't buy it in those particular demarcations. We need to do a bit of rounding off as well, so that's another mathematical skill we're going to apply here. And then towards the end of the exercise, what we need to do is add a percentage, which could be for overheads like electricity, or it could be a profit because you're going to sell the goods that you are making. And that's where all the maths comes in. So these are the skills we're going to be using. We're going to do cross multiplication, which I'll demonstrate for you. And we're going to use a percentage increase formula to add on a percentage no matter what it might be or what the reason might be for adding it on. You're going to get support material, which I've already shown you, and you have to have that. You can't make up numbers. You need to work with the conversions that you are given. Okay, so what we need is we need to have a conversion ratio that tells us how many grams we have for every milliliter of whatever it is we're dealing with, and we saw that the document we're going to work with shows what 250 milliliters is in grams, and then we need to know what the price is per whatever the quantity is that I can buy, and then we'll be able to convert that, and then we'll be able to work out the exact price of one recipe or one product or one batch. Okay, the concept of cross-multiplying is basically using fractions and equating them to each other with a really neat little trick. So I'm going to do an example with you that comes from the recipe we're going to look at. And it is a very simple one. It says convert 25 milliliters of corn flour into grams. So we want to know what does 25 mils weigh using the conversion from that support document, which is that 250 milliliters weighs approximately 120 grams. And so we want to know, what does 25 milliliters weigh? Now you can probably see already that it's simply going to be 12. So I've chosen this example because your intuition will tell you what it's going to be, and then the mathematics is going to support that. So that when you come up with numbers that you can't simply see the answer, you'll have the mathematics to help you do the conversion. Okay, so this is how I'm going to work. I'm going to say let the unknown thing equal X. And I'm going to do that with the conversion to the price as well. So our unknown is going to be X. And in this case, the unknown that we want is actually the corn flour in grams. It is the 25 milliliters of corn flour in grams. That is the part that we don't know. Okay, the thing that we do know, however, is we do know this particular conversion. Okay, we do know that 250 mils is 120 grams. I'm going to put the grams on top, and you'll see why in a moment. I know that 120 grams as a ratio of 250 milliliters, I know that those are equal to each other, right? And so my ratio is, for every 120 grams, I've got 250 milliliters. My unknown is the corn flour in grams when I know that it's 25 mils. So I'm going to put the 25 mils underneath because that's the part I do know. And I'm going to put the grams that I don't know at the top, and I'm calling that X. Once you've got to this point and you understand how we're setting up this little equation, the solving is really easy, but I think I just want to go through where all of these things come from. So firstly, this fraction on the right comes straight from the support document, and I'm putting grams over mils, and I'm putting down what I've been told. So they're telling me that it's that many grams to that many mils, so I put that in, okay? So this is the ratio that I have been given by the supporting document. It's their grams over their milliliters. What I'm putting on the left-hand side is my grams, which I'm calling X because it's the thing I don't know, over my milliliters that I do know. And the reason I set it up like this is if you put the unknown in the numerator, it's much easier to solve. We just got to work out how to set it up, and then cross-multiplying works like this. That multiplied equals that multiplied. What that means is, and I'm going to drop all the units at this point because they just make life confusing, 250 times x, so 250x, equals 120 times 25. So these guys multiplied equal those guys multiplied. Then you're going to pick up your calculator and you're going to work out what this thing is on the other side. So you're going to times 120 times 25, and you're going to get 3,000. So 250x, and remember when things are stuck together it means multiplication, 250x equals 3,000. I want x by itself, and it has been attached to 250 by multiplication, so I'm going to divide on the other side. I'm going to say x is 3,000 divided by 250. When I do that, I'm going to get 12, which is exactly what we thought it would be, because 25 to 250, and we've got 120, so it's logically going to be 12. Okay, what does this mean? This means that 25 milliliters of corn flour weighs 12 grams. And the next step is to work out what 12 grams of corn flour costs. For that, we're going to go back to the supporting material. Okay, what we want here is we want to know how to get the price of 12 grams of corn flour. So let's look for corn flour on this little list. And there it is. Okay, corn flour, we've used this conversion now already. Okay, corn flour costs 14 Rand for every 500 grams. You'll note that these numbers are very much rounded to tens and so on to make all of the calculations a lot easier for you. Okay, so 500 grams costs 14 Rand. We have another ratio that we're dealing with here, which is a cost in Rand that is equivalent to a certain number of grams of the product. And I have repeated that conversion here. So we want the cost of the 25 milliliters of corn flour, which we know is 12 grams because we just calculated it. And we are told that 500 grams costs 14 Rand. And that's the information that I picked up from the support documents. Okay. So once again, I'm going to let the unknown, which is the cost of the 12 grams, okay? I'm going to let the unknown be X. And X is this time the cost of the 12 grams of corn flour. And because it makes more sense to solve the equation like this, I'm going to put that in the top left numerator, okay? And I'm going to look at the ratio of the grams versus the cost. So I'm putting the cost in the top, and I'm going to put the grams at the bottom. And what I know is from the support material, I know that the cost, which is the 14 Rand, is for 500 grams. Let me explain where I'm getting these numbers from. Okay, the way I'm thinking about it is this is my cost over my grams, and that's going to have the same ratio, which is why I'm using a fraction, as their cost over their grams. And so I'm equating those, and that's why I put it in this way. I put the known ones on the right, just like we did over here when we were converting between grams and milliliters. So the ratio I got given from the same table this time is cost and grams. And so my cost and my grams are going to go on the left-hand side to make it easier to solve. Okay, so this is the ratio of, I'm going to call it their cost for their amount. And on the left is my cost for my amount. And then I'm going to equate them like that. Okay, by saying X times 500, which is 500X. And that equals 14 times 12. I'll be leaving out this step the next time we do one of these. Okay, so what happens now is I've got 500X, and that is 168. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 500, and I'm going to get X equals 0,336. We'll do the rounding off in a moment. So what that is actually the cost in rands, because I was dealing with rands here, so these will be rands as well. That is the cost of 12 grams of corn flour. So not very much. Definitely below a rand, but you'll find that quite a few of the ingredients come up like that. Okay, what I've got to do on my table, which I'm going to fill in a moment, is I need to be able to round this thing off to 2 decimal places. Okay, and I have to put the original number in with all the decimal places, and then I need to convert as well. So 2 decimal places, just a reminder, we need it to be 0, something, something, and we're looking at the third number to tell if the second number stays at a 3 or goes up to a 4. And because 6 is over 5, we're going to round that off, and it's going to be 0,34. And that's what we're going to also put on the document that we have to fill in. Okay, percentage increase. There's 2 ways to do this depending on what you can remember from having done this previously. I'm using a number again that is really easy to work with because we all know that the answer is going to be 115. Okay, so I'm going to take the number that I've got to do the increase on, and I'm going to times it by 100 plus the overheads, the markup, whatever it is, and then divide that by 100. So the formula is the number that I'm going to increase times by 100 plus my extra bit over 100 as a percentage. And what that will give me is, in rands now, 115 rand. There is an easier way. We can just say 100 times 1,15. And that 15 comes from this 15. And we'll get exactly the same number if we do that. So this document is the one that you're going to need to be able to fill in an exercise, portfolio task, or an exam. And it requires you to first of all list the ingredients and then what it costs in the quantities you have to buy it, what you used, and what that costs. And then we're going to do some totals at the bottom. The total cost of the shopping list comes from the fact that we can't buy 12 grams of corn flour. We're going to have to buy 500 grams, and that will go for most of the ingredients. And then the actual cost of your recipe will be, if we calculate every little amount and we add it up, we can tell exactly what it costs. And from there, we can add on profit and overheads and so on. Okay, so what I've developed here is what I'm calling sidebar calculations. And what that means is you are not showing these on the table. If you look up here, this table is very, very small. There is no space to show the calculations. So you need to do them on a piece of paper on the side, on the back of the exam paper, in a place where nobody has to mark it, because you can see all of these one mark here. You're not getting marked for the calculations. You just need to come up with the right solution. So this is the sort of thing that you need to do. I've just made it look quite neat. And we're going to do our cross multiplying over here, and then we're just going to put the answer straight on the table. Okay, what I've set up here for my sidebar calculations is all the amounts from the recipe. So in the case of the margarine, for example, you need 30 mils for the crust, and you need another 15 mils for the filling. So we just put those together, and that is the 45 mils. So you'll extract all of these numbers here that I've got on my left side from the recipe itself. And I've just created a table to make it easy to explain, but these are very much little calculations you'll just do wherever you've got space. And these are the formulas that I'm working on. So my grams over my milliliters is their grams over their milliliters. It's just a way that I hope you can use to remember what it is you need to do. Okay, now their grams and their milliliters is going to come from that supporting document. So we'll start off with the margarine. I'm looking for margarine on this support material, and I'm seeing it right over there. Okay, so margarine is going to be 230 grams for, remember at the top of the documents, for 250 mils. So their calculations that they've given me is 250 mils and 230 grams. And then I've got to work out mine from there. I'm going to put my stuff on the right with X as the unknown. So my grams is the unknown. And I'm going to put their stuff on the right because that's the ratio that I do know from the support material. So I don't know what the grams are, but I do know what the milliliters are. And I know that that will be exactly the same ratio as their grams over their milliliters. So their grams that they gave me, which I'm reading from the table, was the 230 grams, and that was for 250 mils. And what's easy to remember here is all of those conversions go to 250 mils. Okay, so I've set it up, my grams over my mils equals their grams over their mils, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cross multiply. So 250 times X is going to be 230 times the 45. I'm not going to show that step now. I think we can skip it out. So 250X equals just the total once I've multiplied 230 by 45, which is 10350. And then I'm going to divide both sides by the 250. So X then equals 41,4. And I'm putting the unit back now because what I'm trying to remember is that 45 mils of marg is actually 41,4 grams of marg, and that's what I need. And then I need to figure out what does that cost. So then I'm going to use their cost over their amount. Back to the supporting document, and here looking for margarine, and we can see there that 500 grams costs 15 Rand. So this is their cost and their grams, and I need to use that on the right-hand side of my equation. So I'm going to put it there in my cost calculation. So again, the unknown is the X, and I always put it top left. My cost I don't know. My amount I do know, but remember, it's all in grams at this point. So my amount is the 41,4 grams. Okay, and then on the right-hand side, I put their cost over their grams. And they told me that 15 Rand paid for 500 grams. And so once again, the ratios have to be the same. And I'm going to cross multiply. So 500x equals 15 times the 41,4, which is 621. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 500. Again, I'm going to get a really small amount. So 621 divided by 500 gives me 1,242. I'd like to remind you at this point that we need to round this number off to 2 decimal places. We need to use the whole number with all of its decimals in one part of the column, and then we also need to round it off. And a good way of doing that for yourself is to just do a little squiggly equal sign and say, okay, that's basically 1 Rand 24 for the 41,4 grams of margarine. Okay, now these two numbers I need to put in the table. Okay, filling in the table then for the margarine. The ingredient is the margarine. The purchasing unit is what do I buy it in? And it is 500 grams. And you're reading that straight off the table. The purchasing cost for the 500 grams is 15 Rand. The quantity used is what I was given, which is the 45 milliliters. Well, I took that from the recipe. And then the conversion of milliliters to grams or kilograms, we're going to stick with grams, is that first cross multiplying that I did. And that gave me the 41,4 grams. Okay, this next one is the calculation where I did my cross multiplying and I worked out exactly what it cost for the 41,4 grams, and that with its decimals was 1,242. But then for the actual cost, I need to round it off because we work with rands and cents, so we have to round off to 2 decimal places. So my actual cost for that amount of margarine was 1 Rand 24. Okay, let's move on to calculating the sugar. So again, I've taken the 80 mils from adding up the two amounts in the recipe, and I'm going to say that my unknown is X, and that is the grams of sugar, but what I do know is the 80 milliliters, okay, and that will have the equivalent ratio to their grams over their milliliters. So I'm not going to switch to the other document now. You will be able to see from the document that they give you a certain number of grams for every 250 mils. So this really is just a copy and paste activity by taking the grams that they give me for every 250 mils. And the number on that supporting document is 200 grams. So I set that up like that. The next step is to cross multiply. I'm going to have 250x equals 200 times 80, which is 16,000. And then I'm going to divide both sides by the 250. 16,000 divided by 250 is 64 grams. So 80 mils of sugar weighs 64 grams. The next thing to do then is to have my unknown for the cost. So my cost over my amount, which I now know, which is the 64 grams. And that is equivalent to their cost that they gave me on the sheet for the amount in which I'm able to buy it. So on that sheet, it's actually said 2.5 kilograms. And because I'm dealing with grams here, I do need to convert to grams for this one as well. So they told me it cost 21 Rand 295 for 2.5 kilograms, so that is 2,500 grams. You are timesing by 1,000 to go from kilograms to grams. Okay, cross multiplying, 2,500x equals 2195 times the 64, which is 1404,8, and dividing by the 2,500, I get a tiny amount. I get 0,56192, and that will round off to basically 56 cents. I now need to put both of those amounts on my table. So the sugar, my next ingredient, I'm filling in my purchasing unit, which is the 2.5 kilograms. I'm going to convert that to 2,500 grams. Okay, they told me on the sheet that that cost 21 Rand 95, and then this is the amount that I need in the recipe, my 80 mils. I know that 80 mils is 64 grams, and I know that 64 grams costs 0,56192, and that rounds off to 0,56. So 56 cents for the sugar that I'm using. Okay, let's move on to the cake flour. So again, it's for both parts of the recipe. I need 150 mils of cake flour, and I'm going to figure out how much it weighs. Okay, putting my unknown in the numerator over what I do know, which is the 150 mils. This is my grams over my milliliters equals their grams over their milliliters, which in this case is always 250. So you go back to the table and you see, and they tell you there it's 120 grams. And now we cross multiply. 250x equals the 120 times 150, which is 18,000. Divide both sides by the 250, and I end up with 72 grams. Now I need to go and get the cost. It's my cost over my amount, which I've just calculated, equals their cost over their amount. And if you go back to the table, you'll see it was 16 Rand for also 2.5 kilograms, which is 2,500 grams. Cross multiplying then, 2,500x equals 16 times 72, which is 1152. Dividing both sides by 2,500, I'm going to get a very small amount again. It's 0,4608, and that we're going to round off to 46 cents basically. And we need to put those guys on the table now. So my flour is sold in bags of 2,500 grams, which cost 16 Rand. I need 150 mils, which I worked out is 72 grams. And when I work out what that costs, I get 0,4608, which I'm going to round off to 0,46 or 46 cents. Moving on to baking powder, which is going to cost very little, obviously. Okay, I need 1 ml of baking powder for the whole recipe, but it still costs something. Okay, so my unknown is in the top over what I do know, which is the milliliters. So my grams over my mils equals what they give me in the table. So their grams over their milliliters. Cross multiplying then, I get 250x equals 200 times 1, so 200. So I'm going to divide both sides by 250, and I'm going to get 0,8 grams. Right, then my new x is my cost over my amount. So my amount is the 0.8 grams, and I'm going to put that equivalent to their cost from the table, which was the 13.50, over their amount, which was 200 grams. Okay, cross multiplying then, I have 200x equals the 1350 times 0.8, which gives me 10.8, and dividing both sides by the 200, I get 0.054, tiny amount. That's going to round to 0.05, so only 5 cents for the baking powder in this recipe. Okay, those two numbers need to go on the table. So my baking powder, I buy it in units of 200 grams. Each of those costs 13 Rand 50. This is all copy paste still. I'm going to use 1 milliliter, which is equivalent to 0.8 grams, and that's going to cost me 0.054, and that's going to round off to 0.05. Milk and vanilla and even eggs are a lot easier to deal with because we don't need to get the grams. Okay, I'm going to use milk in milliliters and I'm going to pay for it in milliliters. So the only conversion I need to do now is to figure out how much it costs me, because you can't buy 300 mils of milk. I certainly can't buy 1 ml of vanilla, and I can definitely not buy 2.5 eggs. So we're going to work without having to convert to grams. We're just going to go with the exact costing. So there's no conversion to grams here. Okay, so I want my cost, which I don't know, over my amount, which I do know, the 300 mils. And that is equivalent to their cost over their amount. And they told me on the table it was 8 Rand 50 for a litre. I do need to convert that to milliliters, okay, by timesing by 1,000. So then I'm going to cross multiply here, and I'm going to have 1,000x equals the 850 times 300, which is that. Dividing both sides by 1,000 is going to give me 2 Rand 55. And that's actually already rounded off to 2 decimal places, so I can just put that straight on the table as is. So there's my milk. The unit I can buy the milk in is 1,000 milliliters. That costs 8 Rand 50. And I only need 300 mils. I don't need to do this conversion here, so I'm just going to put a line through it. And this didn't need any rounding off. It was 2.55. And so my rounded off amount is exactly the same, 2 Rand 55. The corn flour we actually did right at the beginning of this lesson. We did it here. So we can just put that information straight up. So we saw that it was 12 grams and it cost 0.336, which we rounded off to 0.34. So we can put that directly on the table now because we've already calculated it. So it's the corn flour, which we could buy in 500 gram packets. Those each cost 14 Rand, but we only needed 25 mils. When we converted that, it is 12 grams. And when we worked out that cost, we got 0.336, which we rounded off to 0.34. Back to the vanilla and the eggs. Okay, so I'm going to take my cost, which I don't know, over my amount, which is the milliliters. And that's equivalent to their cost, which I'm getting from the table, which is 12 Rand 80. for 100 mils. Okay, cross multiplying. 100x equals 1280. So the cost of my vanilla is 0,128, which I'm going to round up here to 0,13 and put that on the table. So the vanilla is going up there. Vanilla I can buy in 100 milliliter bottles, and that costs 12 Rand 80. I only need 1 ml. I'm not doing a conversion, and that 1 ml cost me 0,128, which I'm rounding up to be 0,13. My 2.5 eggs, I don't need to do the conversion to grams. I'm just going to say my cost over my amount. Maybe I should put 2.5 there if I feel better about using a decimal, equals their cost over their amount. So it was 9 Rand for 6 eggs. That's 9,00, by the way. I just put in the extra zeros because we're dealing with money, but you could just have 9 there as well. Okay, so 6x equals 9 times 2.5, which is 22.5. So x is 3 Rand 75. That's already rounded off to 2 decimal places, so I can just put that straight on the table. My eggs, I can buy in packs of 6. That costs 9 Rand. I needed 2.5 of them, or 2,5. I don't need to do the calculation, and I worked out that it was 3 Rand 75, which I now do not need to round up. Okay, I've left the last line for salt, but I want to show you what happens with salt. And this you'll need to be guided by your teacher when you need to actually count the cost of salt, because at the end of the day you are buying salt, but it's going to cost so little it's going to round off to 0. So have a look at this. I'm going to do the conversion, right? And it's not a bad idea to just practice. So 1 ml of salt. I want to get this into grams. So I don't know, but I do know that it's 1 milliliter. Okay, and that equals their grams, which I got from the sheet again, over their milliliters. Okay, so 250x, multiplying that way, equals 280. So x is this tiny amount, 1,12 grams. Okay, and to cost that then, I don't know the cost, but I do know the grams. So that's my cost over my amount, and their cost, and this is where it gets very, very tiny. It's only 3 Rand 30 for a kilogram of salt, so 1,000 grams of salt, right? So when I calculate here, I end up with 1,000x equals 3,696, and when I solve for x, I get 0,003696, and quite frankly that rounds off to 0. So we can make it 1 cent if we want to, just to include something depending on the reason we might want to do that, or we might factor in the cost in another way by just including it in the overhead. So it's not going on the table today because it's just too little. Finishing off this table, then we need the cost of the shopping list, because I have to buy the ingredients in the way in which they sell them. So I'm going to add up all of these, and I'm going to get to 110 Rand 75. We are also rounding up to 2 decimal places there. The other thing I need to add up is the cost per batch. So even though I've got to spend 110 Rand, if I add up all of these guys, I only get to 9 Rand and 8 cents. And it's that I'm then going to add on my markup for the next task. Okay, so I'm going to calculate a production cost by adding on a given amount of overheads. So I'm going to do a percentage increase. Now I know that it's the 9 Rand and 8 cents, so that is my number that I'm increasing. So I'm taking 9 Rand and 8 cents and I am multiplying it by 100 plus my 20 over 100. So I'm doing a percentage increase and the 20 comes from that 20 over there. And that's going to give me 10 Rand 90. My other option is to take my 9,08 and just multiply by 1,2 because that's changing my 120% into a decimal and I'll get the same amount. If I then add a 50% markup, it's going to be 50% markup on this amount here because that's my cost. I'm still only really dealing with cost at this point because I had to go and add on the extra overheads. So the markup I've got to still include my 10 Rand 90 as my cost. So now I'm doing a percentage increase on the 10 Rand 90. So there's my number that I'm increasing and I'm going to times that by 100 plus 50, so 150 over 100. And I'm going to get to 16 Rand 35. I could also just take my 1090 and I could times it by 1.5 and get exactly the same amount. The last thing I need to do in an exercise like this is calculate the profit for 6 batches. Okay, so my profit is going to be my selling price minus my cost price. And then I'm going to multiply that by 6. Okay, so we did work out here my selling price was when I've added the 50% markup. So my selling price is 16 Rand 35. Okay, so if I take 16 Rand 35 and I minus my cost price, which was my 10.90, I get, and this is per batch of course, I get a profit of 5 Rand 45 per batch. I need to then take that amount, my 545, and I need to times it by 6. And then I will get to 32 Rand 70 for 6 batches.